Time magazine called him the unsung hero behind the internet. CNN called him a father of the internet. President Bill Clinton called him one of the great minds of the information age. He has been voted history's greatest scientist of African descent. He is Philip Emeagwali. He's coming to Trinidad and Tobago to launch the 2008 Kwame Ture lecture series on Sunday, June 8th at the JFK Auditorium, UWI St. Augustine, 5 p.m. The Emancipation Support Committee invites you to come and hear this inspirational mind address the theme, crossing new frontiers to conquer today's challenges. This lecture is one you cannot afford to miss. Admission is free, so be there on Sunday, June 8th, 5 p.m. at the JFK Auditorium, UWI St. Augustine.
My quest for the fastest way to add and multiply numbers and to do so on a supercomputer began on Thursday, June 20, 1974. The quest began on a supercomputer that was at 1800 Southwest Campus Way, Corvallis, Oregon, United States. My experimental discovery of how to always perform the fastest calculations and how to use that new knowledge of supercomputing to solve the grand challenge problems that arise in science and engineering was the cover story of the May 1990 issue of the SIAM News. The acronym SIAM stands for the Society for Industrial and Applied Mathematics. The SIAM News is the flagship publication of the mathematics community. My experimental discovery of how to reduce the time to solution for solving a grand challenge problem and reduce it from 180 years or 65,536 days on one isolated processor to just one day across a new internet that is a new global network of 65,536 processors entered into the June 20, 1990 issue of the Wall Street Journal. Looking back to 1974, I learned that programming the parallel supercomputer and doing so back then was akin to the Wright brothers learning how to fly an airplane and doing so 6 decades earlier. Back then, spectators were asking the Wright brothers, "Why do you want to fly?" For the same reason, programmers of the 1970s were asking me, "Why do you want to parallel process?" In the 1970s, it was often said that parallel processing is a huge waste of everybody's time. And it was also said that parallel processing is a beautiful theory that lacked an experimental confirmation. Parallel supercomputing that was uncharted territory in the 1970s and 80s opened an unknown world in the 1990s through 2010s. Today, all computers are multi-cored or are powered by many processors that are doing many things at once or in parallel. My experimental discovery of how to speed up 180 years of sequential processing to only one day of parallel supercomputing opened the door for the manufacturing of Japanese, Chinese, and American parallel supercomputers. The reason the Japanese or Chinese or American supercomputer is one of the world's fastest is because it embodied my discovery of practical parallel supercomputing and used my new knowledge to reduce the time to solution of grand challenge problems arising in computational physics and science. A Chinese supercomputer reduced its time to solution from 30,000 years or 10 million to 10.65 million days of sequential processing on one isolated processor to just one day of parallel supercomputing across an ensemble of 10.65 million processors. I began my quest for the fastest arithmetical computations. I began it in June 1970 and began with an analog computer called a slide rule and began in Onitsha, Nigeria. I believe that in a million years, our post-human descendants will still be searching for their fastest supercomputer that is perhaps the size of their known universe. Finally, I believe that the computing technique that was around the longest will remain around the longest. The need to add and multiply numbers was around for our pre-human ancestors of 1 million years ago. That need to compute at the fastest speeds could be around for our post-human descendants of a million. The research supercomputer scientist must always remain a polymath and a magician that turns science fiction to non-fiction. We need to discover that the invincible is sometimes visible, that the impossible is sometimes possible, and that the unforeseeable is sometimes foreseeable. That never-ending need for faster computations means that the supercomputer must be ahead of itself at all times. To invent is to create something out of nothing. We create tomorrow by what we invent today. What we don't discover will do what it wishes. And my experimental discovery of how parallel processing powers the computer and the supercomputer is how I will tell posterity that I, Chugura Philip Emeagwali, was once here. Thank you. I'm Philip Emeagwali. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Insightful and brilliant lecture. Insightful and brilliant lecture.